I noticed that you have Ringo at number 2.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that happen? I know early on, of course, Ringo was supposed to actually be the top corner.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a lot of negativity about Ringo for a little bit. Maybe he was just picked on too much. Let's try to find a whole bunch of reasons not to like the guy. But all of a sudden, Ringo stays firm there on your list at number 2.
Yeah, and maybe you can call me stubborn if you want, but I love his tape. I don't think he was a perfect player. And what are we doing here? If we're going to evaluate them as college football players, then yeah, a couple of guys had better college careers than him. But I did see progress in 2022. His biggest weakness is what? Route anticipation, instincts, knowing what the receiver is going to do. Hey, you can have all the reaction time in the world, all the speed, but if you don't know mentally what's going on, you're not going to be able to cover NFL receivers. And that's a red flag. But I saw improvements in 2022. I even saw improvements against Marvin Harrison Jr., the best receiver in the nation right now. And on the plays where he did beat him in that Ohio State-Georgia game, they were broken plays, right? No one's going to cover that guy for more than 3-4 seconds, Marvin Harrison. So I'm not even going to use that. What I like about him is just the ability to trail defenders, right? He is one of few that can make a really significant impact as a press corner, like really prevent a guy from getting off the line. And then if he does get beat, he's a guy, and we saw this against Tennessee against Cedric Tillman. I think this kid picked off Will Levis, Hendon Hooker, and Bryce Young. Shows up in big moments, and the size that he has, and he's 6'2", 207. Almost has like a safety type body, and he's not long. He's not short, but sometimes if you see 6'2", you're like, oh, he's a huge corner. He's a pretty average size corner. He's tall, but he doesn't have great arm length, so he doesn't have that huge radius. But what he does have is the ability to catch up to a guy from behind, locate the football, high point the football, and take it away. That's what I like about him. And he's unbelievably physical too. He might actually end up being a safety at some point if it doesn't work out for corner because of how physical he plays.
Now, as far as the draft is concerned, though, do you think it's going to be Gonzalez and Witherspoon battling it out for the number 1 corner, and both guys probably in the top 10?
I think, yeah, you're right. Both guys are likely in the top 10. I believe Gonzalez, it's a hard sell that Witherspoon should go in front of Gonzalez. I just don't see what does Witherspoon have that Gonzalez doesn't, other than maybe he's a little bit more physical against the run downhill. But to me, that's not why you're going to draft a corner, So Gonzalez, I think, is the number 1. Then I think there's a gap. Then you got Ringo Witherspoon. But to answer your question, draft weekend, those guys are probably going to go 1-2. And very confident Gonzalez is top 10. Witherspoon, it's going to be about who ends up trading for who stays in the top 10, who leaves the top 10. But he's top 10 caliber.
Okay. And then taking a look, you have – because do you think, again, just talking about the draft, do you think Ringo, Porter, Banks, maybe even Forbes, do you think those guys can be interchangeable on where they go in the first round?
Not Forbes.
So Forbes is a second rounder.
Yeah, I just can't see someone with his body type. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I would love to see it because I like him.
Well, once you get down to like the last couple of picks of the first round, anything can happen. So
yeah, anything can happen. So, but I think Banks, Porter, Witherspoon, Ringo, Gonzalez, those are the top 5, and I think it's a hard sell that Forbes or any of these guys below them should go ahead of those guys.
All right. So then, and that next group is what? Forbes, Moss, and what? Brent's, just those 3?
Brent's and yes, and Brent's, and then there's a little bit of a gap before we get to Tyreek Stevenson, Cam Smith, Darius
Cam
Rush.
Smith, do you are you a little bit lower on him? Some people might have him a little higher.
Yeah, it's possible at this point in the draft. When you go look at 8 through 15, you can see a lot of interchangeables. I had Cam Smith top 3 at this group for a long time.
I remember that.
Just didn't love. Some of my deeper dive tape at him. I don't feel like he really trusts his technique. So a guy that doesn't trust his technique and doesn't have great anticipation, gets really grabby. I could see him being a guy that gets penalized at the next level. Didn't measure in as big and strong as I thought he would. But again, in an incredibly strong cornerback group, don't be mistaken. The number 10 corner here is still a starting caliber.
Okay, and then 11 through 20, you have Rush, Phillips, Turner, Kelly, Valentine, Blackman, Wright, Garner, Smith and Jones. And the guy that I noticed you have a little bit, again, maybe dropped on your list is Turner from Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Well, I've always kind of had Turner in this like mid to late day two, or I sorry, late day two, early day three tier. I never viewed him as different than that. And I think the excellent big time combine performance maybe boosts him up a little bit. I always get nervous about that. I get nervous about, does he actually play to his speed, right? It does show up from time to time, but is he also going to get pushed around? Like, he doesn't have a lot of presence on contact, right? Like, I don't know if he's going to win a lot of contested situations. I still don't know if he fits better at nickel or on the outside, right? You see the speed, you say outside. I see the short shuttle three cone and ability to change direction without loss of momentum as a good nickel. And the nickel is very valuable in the NFL. I think it's almost as valuable as the outsides. So, I mean, the fact that he probably could play both could actually get him drafted a little bit higher. You know, how long it takes him to really kind of just become a repeatable, consistent player is going to dictate a lot. I think it might scare some teams draft weekend, especially, again, in such a strong corner class. I just feel better. I feel safer with some of these other guys.
One guy that intrigues me is Phillips from Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be a guy that, I don't know, just seems to be playmaker.
Yep.
And I like playmakers, and especially the guys that come from that program on defense. So what's his ceiling?
A really good nickel. You know, one of the top nickels in the league. And the funny thing is he played outside in college. So it's not like this is a guy that, yes, his measurements are, you know, we've talked about this a few times, kind of off the charts in the wrong direction. Short arms, small wingspan. So that could be, you know, that can make life difficult for him on the outside. But he's a starting nickel week one, in my opinion. You know, 9 career interceptions, 4 career pick sixes. Comes across as someone that really wants to be great. I think cornerbacks need to have almost too much confidence, to be honest with you. And he has that mentality. Coaches have raved about how well prepared he is, how much film he watches. And this is the opposite of some of the corners we talked about. Ringo, right? This kid knows what's going to happen before it happens. And you could see the ball production come from it. And if there are some teams that might not look at him because of the size, but the teams that will give him a pass because of how much of a playmaker he is, if he gets put into that right scheme, right role right away, he can be one of those guys that, you know, we make the R-Lads all-rookie team in January, that he's easily on it because of production.
Okay, give me a home run hitter, bottom 10.
Carrington Valentine is a guy that I don't think anyone has early to midday 3 grade on him. I like him a lot as a press corner. I think some of the techniques and repeatability and aggression that he shows is something that I've been drawn to all year. Watched a lot of Kentucky football this past season for a few reasons, and he just jumped off the screen before I knew who he was. And whenever that happens, it always like, all right, let's look deeper into this kid. Can he play stronger? Is he scheme versatile? He does pretty poorly in zone coverage. Just kind of a little late to react, a little late to see. He gets sucked in by quarterback's eyes very easily. But if you could just put him on an island and let him, and he's got good size, great speed, you know, so I think all the tools are there to be a day 3 value.
Yeah, Arliz has him as a 7th rounder. And who would you be concerned with the most? Somebody that in that top 10 that could end up as a bust of some sorts.
I'll tell you what, Deonte Banks, even though I do have him number 5, I wonder if I got sucked in by this too. He reminds me of, the name I have on him is Kelvin Joseph.
Oh,
if you remember him, he was a corner from Kentucky, a lot of tools, had some issues too, maturity issues, but he hasn't turned into anything. He's not even a factor in their defensive backfield right now. And again, on paper, he looks great. Then he goes to the combine and blows it up. I'm like, okay, wow. And you go back and watch his tape again, or for some, you watch it for the first time, and it's not that you don't see the speed and explosion. You do see that, but you also just see a lot of sloppy play. And a guy, and again, in the NFL, technique is still important, even for the freaks of the freaks. And I think he's got a pretty long way to go. Whoever drafts him, I wouldn't count on a year 1 starter.